if nobody talks today, then I guess maybe we'll just start with the page 17. So we should do our opening prayer. So let me do the screen share here. Hopefully I got this queued up. So, and I want to make a point here. So here you can see is, excuse me, I'm just cleaning up my desk here. Right here is a yogi. So he is a practitioner, much like we are or could be. And then in his visualization, he is seeing Vajrasattva, the Buddha Vajrasattva, the purification Buddha, that the section that we do, the purification that we do that starts on page 14, 15, and 16. This is the visualization of Vajrasattva in the three Buddha families. So here he'd be in the Amitabha family, here he'd be in the, this would be the Ratna family, this would be the Amagog City family, this would be the Baranchana family, and this would be the Ascobia family. So this is a visualization. This is an image of that visualization. So many times these things are helpful. So now we go to this. And we recite the altruistic motivation. So if everybody can do this together, will be great. I know your microphones are off, but that way we won't feedback, but we can recite this out loud. And so this is the action bodhicitta prayer. Wait a minute. There, we start here with the altruistic motivation. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Okay, thank you. So we can take a minute and sit in our meditation position. If you're sitting on a floor, on a cushion or whatever, keeping your back straight, your legs crossed. If you're sitting on a chair, your legs together, your feet together, and sitting straight, keeping your back straight is the most important part. Your hands can be 4 inches below your navel with the right hand lying in the left hand and the 2 thumbs touching. You can keep your hands at your navel, if you at your knees if you prefer, or whatever comfortable is most suitable for you. Your shoulders are back, shoulders are relaxed. Your hands naturally come right up into your navel area when you're in the meditation position. And then your head is just slightly down. Your chin is just tucked down just a little bit. So you can visualize that your face is kind of like a gallant horse. And then your eyes are closed or open. You're open, it should be just a gaze, not staring at something, not thinking of something, just a gaze. You close your eyes in the beginning is usually very good. Less distractions that way. So we sit in this position. And to help us with a short meditation, we use the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Very simply. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Take a deep breath through both nostrils. Fill your lungs with fresh, clean, pure air and hold the breath. Expand your belly. Expand your diaphragm. It pulls your lungs down and opens up the lungs and pulls the air in. Hold the breath. Then exhale, squeeze the belly, squeeze the abdomen, press against the diaphragm, pushes against the lungs and forces all that stale, negative, dark air out through our nostrils and hold that empty breath. Breathe in again. Expand the belly. Hold the breath. Exhale. Squeeze the belly. Dark, negative, stale air goes out. Hold the breath. Keep your back straight. Breathe in again. Hold it. Exhale. Hold it. Breathe in. Breathe out. Stay relaxed. Keep your shoulders relaxed. Breathe in. Out. Breathe in very deeply. Hold it. And exhale very completely. Hold it. And then relax and breathe normal at your own pace. Just relax your mind. And watch your breath breathing in and out. Keep your mind from wandering. And recite the mantra quietly to yourself, Om Mani Padme Hum. Take a short 5-minute meditation. a deep breath. Hold it. Exhale. Relax, breathe normal, open your eyes. And we're back. Okay. So does anybody have anything that you want to talk about the Bardo Thodol as we've done it, or anything related to that? Any questions or comments?
Yes, I have a
Yes,
question.
please go, Jane.
It's really been fascinating learning this ancient practice, but one thing I've wondered throughout is, are there differences in how this is practiced in the East versus here in the West? And has this been modernized at all for our current day?
This text is the text that was composed by Padmasambhava, and that whatever monastery has printed this and so on. By any chance, book in the forward, I guess, or the introduction, that this is the first complete English translation that this has ever been done. So of all the different chapters, what we are practicing with the Bardo Thodol, this part here is, I think, only chapter 6, but there's the liberation by wearing, the liberation by seeing, the liberation by immediate, the poa, so there's different parts of this. And we've been looking at what is referred to as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Thodol. This is the book by liberation by hearing in the intermediate states.
Which is chapter 6. Is that what you just said?
I think so. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but I think that's what it is. I could be wrong. Might be chapter.
So what is the main book again?
The book is called, just give me a moment so I get it absolutely correct for you. The book is titled The Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Okay.
And this is a hardback, but it's also available in a paperback. And this is called The First Complete Translation. And it's been worked on by many great scholars, and Gurme Dorje is known to be a great Sanskrit scholar. And so he's the principal translator, but it was edited by Graham Coleman, who has written many, many books himself, and with Thupten Jingpa as an editor, and he was the main translator for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So this book has some great credentials.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have that book. I got that book. It's chapter 6, a pertinent chapter that you think we ought to take a look at.
Well, that would be the detail of what we've been studying. That's where this came from.
Okay.
Let me see here. Being as I got the book open. So this is chapter 10. Excuse me.
Chapter 10.
Yes, chapter 10. So the consciousness transference, natural liberation through recollection. So this starts on page 200, 199, 200. So it goes through the transference of consciousness, which is the poa part, and then continues on to hearing. So I would recommend that you start at that very beginning part. If you want to go to chapter 11, then that is the great liberation by hearing. So the poa part is section 10, and section 11 is the great liberation by hearing.
Okay, because I was going to start reading that, but it would be better to look at 10 and 11 first than starting at chapter 1.
Well, I'd always recommend starting at the beginning because there's going to be introduction things, there's going to be contextual things that are going to give you a real flavor of what the book is. So I would read the introductions first. I would do that. You know, if you're looking for specific information, and then you might want to dial in, but it's got acknowledgments, then the introductory commentary by the Dalai Lama. I've got notes all over the place regarding these sections. So there's lots of good stuff here to be learned and appreciated. So the Dalai Lama's commentary goes on for at least 10 or 12 pages. Then there's the editor's introduction. That would be by Graham Coleman and Tingpu. And then and then there's a brief literary history of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and which is very interesting. And then a bit of a biography of the text revealer, the person who found this text, who revealed this text back in the 15th century. So to know his family and to know that he initially found it, but then his sons continued in the tradition to make it available. So over the course of 3 or maybe even 4 generations, was this book being made available to the Tibetans. And then it came out of Tibet in 1923 to America, the translation by Evans Wentz, if anybody had a chance to ever read that. So
Well, I have looked at it.
That was the only translation.
I have looked at it. I've had it for a while, and I've been reading the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. But I have to admit to you that I keep rereading some of this. It seems like it's too large for my mind.
Well,
I had a pretty good feeling about my mind until I started trying to understand the length and breadth of some of this stuff, and I began to feel smaller and smaller as I read it. And I look at the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I've read part of it, but I have to admit that I've been a little bit intimidated by it.
Well, look at it this way: eventually, you're going to disappear.
But the books will still be here, right?
And if that's not liberation, I don't know what is. So that's a bad thing. Yes, Jerry.
So as we have been attending and listening to this wonderful process, I don't remember there being a discussion about while we are in our current reality, that we are being visited, coached, guided by these entities. Are they communicating with us, or is it just through reincarnation that they have meetups with us or something like that? Because in many religions of the world, you talk about being watched and being actually reviewed or discussed or guided or influenced. And I don't remember that much because we're talking about the process of a death. And having not been that well read in, other than what we've been doing over these many weeks, is there something out there that talks about this, like other religions?
Well, I can't speak to other religions. What I can say about the Buddhism is that the fundamental essence of all of this is within ourselves. And that we are recognizing what is happening around us based on what is within us. So there's nothing out there. Buddha Amitabha is not out there. Shenrezig is not out there. Green Tara is not out there somewhere. It's all within us. And we're finding emanations of that. We're recognizing it through ourselves, but then we're recognizing emanations of that with other people. We say, oh, that person's talking, and what that person is saying is very much like Green Tara, or Shenrezig, the Buddha Bodhisattva Shenrezig. So we begin to see that all of this and what we are part of is all of this manifestation of what's in this book. So it's a spiritual journey, and it's all within ourselves. All that wisdom, we have the library within ourselves. all we're doing is through our one-pointed mindfulness, we're resting our body, we're resting our mind that's jumping all around so that we can listen to this subtle wisdom that we have within ourselves.
So
And
that
so-
means that our higher Buddhas really are not there while we're on this earth. They're not influencing us in any way. They're not messaging us or, providing guidance.
They are loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And that is being radiated to all beings simultaneously, perfectly, without any effort at all. That's what the Buddhas do. And
Okay.
we recognize that.
Yes.
And it becomes inspiration for us to be able to cultivate our bodhicitta, our loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So they're not telegraphing anything to us in some new agey kind of way or something like that. It doesn't work that way in Buddhism. It's not expressed that way.
Okay, I can accept that.
What do you think of that answer?
What do I think of that answer?
Yes.
Well, something's been talking to me for the last 76 years out there, and either I'm going nuts. And
Well, how about it's within you? How about it's your karma that
Well,
is talking to you?
I call it my intuition.
Okay.
It's guidance, though, because there's no way I could have done the things I've done in my life unless there was some kind of a messaging coming to me.
One of the first teachings that the Buddha gave was to say, you are all Buddha. I'm not anything special. You are all the same. You all have Buddha potential within you. So the Buddha is trying to talk to us all the time. That Buddha is that awareness, is that wisdom.
But
We all have that.
Yeah. So I know. So I the way I interpret from what you're saying, because I thought maybe the Buddha is sending out these guidance. He's doing some guidance out there while we're on this earth. He is. That's what I think you said, and so
No, I didn't say that.
Okay,
I didn't say it that way.
Right, but it sounds like we're not alone here. We're getting something from the universe. We're getting something. And
We
that's
are the universe.
messaging. That's messaging. So
We are the universe.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have to give up is being able to either blame or give responsibility to other beings outside of ourselves. We have to take responsibility for the things that we do and the things that we think and the things that we change and so on like that. It's within ourselves. So we're
That's what you
recognizing
mean by non-duality, right?
well, that's part of it. Yes. The non-duality comes as a result of that. The non-duality is what we're trying to recognize.
But at the same time, there's all those supplication prayers where these, I'm just going to use a generic term, the divine forces are invited to assist us in overcoming all obstacles and in our path.
But where are
So
they?
that-
Where are those divine deities? Where are they?
Well, from your point of view, what you're trying to express, as I understand it, is it's within us. So the supplication prayer is directed inward, but the
Correct.
verbiage appears to be directed outward,
Well, it's part of the poetics of it.
part of the what?
Well, the poetics, it's the way in which it's expressed, it's flowery and so on like that and made to sound like that. But the realization, because it is a realization to be able to recognize that it's within oneself. Initially, an average person that you meet who reads one of these prayers, they would buy into the fact that, oh yeah, it's all out there. And if you said to them from the get-go, it's all inside of you, I think it's a little too abstract for most people. But once someone gets involved and engages in the philosophy and the practices, then you realize that what all this is you're talking to yourself. You're recognizing all this within yourself. Does that make sense?
Logically, it makes sense. However, as you just alluded to, the way that it's expressed textually, it's very easy to take the meaning as something is out there.
Well, for someone who is not, I have to use the word indoctrinated, who's made familiar with, how this works, yes, it would appear that way. But once you understand how this is working, then you recognize it's all directed within yourself. And that's the thing about the Bardo Thodol, that it's a book for the living and the dying. That's what Sogyal Rinpoche wrote the book. It's for the living and the dying. We read it for the dying, and hopefully they've had these trainings before they died to recognize what's being conveyed to them. But it's also training for us while we're living to be able to recognize those recitations when we pass.
Just as an aside, I was led down a certain road or number of roads today, and I wound up on a website that I use from time to time called Lotsawa House that has a number of translations in it.
We
And
use
what
them all the
prompted me-
time. We use them all the time.
What prompted me to go there was I'd read earlier today about Vimalamitra.
Vimala,
Yes. And somehow in my mind, he was Tibetan, but when I got to Lotsawa House, I couldn't find him there. But when I turned to Indian masters, so he was an Indian and or from India. And when I started reading some of what was purported to come from him, and reference was made to the non-dual state and just relaxing. Key thing is just relaxing. Let the tension go away. And it seemed, I don't want to impute something that is not there, but from what little I did read, it didn't seem that his presentation had all of the Tibetan deities in it and all of the gods and goddesses and all the embroidery of all of these forms. They were just like very straightforward.
Well, it didn't have to. I mean, there's many books that are specific to many different parts of the canon of what we might call, the Buddhist scriptures and so on. So Vimala was not focused on that. He may I'm not sure when he lived, but it doesn't matter. Would you expect that every teacher and all the teachers would be talking about the Bardo Thodol along with all the other things that they're talking about?
No, that's not my point. My point was that the Indian teachers predated the Tibetan teachers, and they were teaching this essential point of emptiness that the Buddha talked about without all of the extra texture that got laid on by the Tibetans.
Well, Padmasambhava was he was a Mahasiddha. And what that means is a great accomplished one. And he composed this teaching. This teaching didn't exist before that, although elements of it were. I mean, many of the deities, and I'm not a scholar, so I can't, say positive about any of this, but many of the deities and so on were expressed in the teachings of the Buddha and subsequent masters who came after him. So in this book, it kind of all comes together for the purpose of liberation. So it's not unusual that someone from India wouldn't be, or maybe he predated what was happening with Padmasambhava and what was happening in Tibet. So to me, that's not unusual.
Hey, Lance,
Yes.
I have to, I found that I had to continually sort of remind myself that the majority of this sort of experiential perspective was external to myself. I mean, the best possible reminder is deity yoga, where literally we get to sort of unpack the whole mandala of deities from ourselves and set it up, you know, in sort of that generation stage. It's like you know, unpacking all the characters from the novel and putting them out in front of us, and then, you know, when we're done with the exercise, we put them all back, and that's very explicit. I mean, so it's a great reminder, because we always need those reminders, because I think very few of us can always be confident that we have that nature, given our general state of dissatisfaction and dukkha, and frankly, lack of confidence in the fact that we could have that sort of nature. But I think that's one of the reasons for deity yoga, is to continue to to take it out, unpack it in front of us, work with it like we're working with models, and communicate with it like we're working with the narrative, and then at the end, you know, condense it all, bring it back, and drop it back into ourselves.
It's the wisdom mind of the Buddha. And we are all that wisdom mind. We have that wisdom mind within ourselves. So, you know, we use the illustration of a diamond. You know, it's made up of bodhicitta, but meanwhile, there's all these different facets, and those facets are the activities of that bodhicitta. And so all those 100 deities are the facets on the diamond, the facets of the jewel of bodhicitta. So we're naming the activities and naming the deities that are associated with those. And it's all symbolic. You know, that's the other thing. These things don't exist in other than our Sambhogagaya mind. Remember, there's the Dharmakaya, which is the truth body of the Buddha. And then because that is so subtle, that then it became dualistic, in that it became the subtle enjoyment body, which is the intellectual and meditational grasping of what that mind is, that Dharmakaya mind, and also the physical emanation of that, to bring it to us to say, hey, you start up here, you got to start thinking about this up here. And then between the body and the intellect, it's like a key that opens up through our meditation and opens up our spiritual body. And that's the Dharmakaya. That's the Dharmakaya, the truth body of the Buddha.
It's like a big fairy tale. So if you want to indulge yourself in the fairy tale as it facilitates your liberation, go for it. But it's not necessary.
Well, you could look at it that way. And it's like a fairy tale. It's a story. It's a narration that we have that has been created and that we've kind of maybe bought into. But at the same time, many people have had the experience of living, of realizing that fairy tale as being the result of Mahamudra, being the result of the great perfection, of the Rigpa, of having that meditation crossing over. And
The crossing over is liberation from concepts.
exactly.
So how could you, when you cross over, carry a concept on your back? It doesn't make sense.
Well, if you're still breathing, you come back into this plane. You come back into this life. You're not gone. You're not. So then it becomes a question of how stable you are in that realization of having crossed over. Because now whatever age it is that you had that realization, now you got the rest of your life to be able to live that experience. So Ken Wilber says, we're all enlightened. That's not hard. It's very easy to be able to do that. We're enlightened by degrees, and by comparing ourselves with other people in the world, they think we're gods. But the difficult part, Ken Wilber says, is living an enlightened life. Now, what are you going to do for the next 20 years or 30 years or 40 years with this realization?
You're probably not going to build Origin to explore space.
Nor build bombs, nor go and become a violent activist and doing, terrible things to each other. So you become a much more sensible person who is peaceful and humble and loving and compassionate and so on, and finding ways in which you can express that. So that when we die, going back to the Bardo Thodol, so that when we die, we don't have anything to hold on to. We don't have that baggage that's pulling us down. All that negativity, all that attachment is not pulling us down. So we can be liberated. So however it is that all this comes together now is not going to happen in the way that it's happened before, to create the degree of suffering that we're going through. So you can say that's a story, but it's a pretty good story. It's a happy story. It's a story of redemption. It's a story of love and compassion.
Well, that's a key issue right there, because when you look at the base model, it's based on dysfunction. It's saying there's suffering. It's saying that everything is messed up, and that's why there's all the agony, and that's why people have all the difficulty. So you go to doctors today, and doctors don't treat healthy people. Doctors treat unhealthy people.
Okay. So let's use the metaphor then of being ill, the illness that people are going to doctors for, that we are spiritually ill, or those people are spiritually ill and suffering as a result, until they find the right medicine to be able to transcend the causes of that suffering. If you transcend the causes of the suffering itself doesn't manifest. Does that make sense?
I didn't get a word count, but your last 30 or 50 words, yes, that makes sense.
Okay. Let's let somebody else speak. I think, you ask good questions, and I like to get back to it. But at the same time, I think other people need to comment about things. So Louisa, do you have anything to say about this? Or John, do you have any comments or thoughts that you'd like to share with us?
Oh, I'm just thinking all this through, and you're very correct in saying that all is within ourselves. We have the ability within ourselves to bring ourselves to heal ourselves. We have the ability also to have the free will of thinking and doing. And however we choose to do, we must always choose to do it with a compassionate, loving heart. That's my thought. Yeah, and even though sometimes we talk about the universe and the good things that it brings us, and we can call upon it, but really, basically, we've got all that in ourselves because we are the universe. We are that in our hearts and our compassion way that we want to look at the world and be part of that kindness and love and peace. And it's always a work in progress. We never totally get there, but we do our very best to go forth in that direction. So that's how I feel about that. You're right in saying it's all within ourselves.
So how does the Bardo Thodol help us with this?
It opens, for me, anyway, I'm not, for me, it opens the door to say, your life can be lived to the fullest, my life, to the fullest. So in compassion and love and bringing as much peace in your everyday life and where you interact or run into people, how you treat them, that can all be part of what's inside of you. And when you transition, it's like you would move in a more peaceful direction than if you didn't have the Bardo Thodol to teach you and prepare you for that. Anyway, that's how I see it.
Do you
I
think
can't
that,
speak. I can't speak for anybody else except myself and my own experience.
well, that's fine. Do you think that the Bardo Thodol has a way of really showing how karma works?
Yes, it does.
Have you seen it any other place? I mean, is there a place that you see being done the same way or better even than the Bardo Thodol?
No, I have not. And this class has opened me up a lot of, I guess a clearer way of thinking about it that I didn't have before. And I've never really had this teaching, and what it's given me has been very beneficial to help me see things a lot more clearly. And those are my dogs in the background.
They got a lovely mantra. Right.
So no, I have not. I did study the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying. That also opened up so much for me that it was very beneficial to me. And I think taking that class many years ago opened me up to more. And that was my interest for wanting to take this class with you, because that first class really, with the Tibetan Book of the Living and Dying, it really struck a chord in me that said, you need to learn more about this. So that's when I became more open to it. And that must have been like, maybe 15 years ago. So that's when I decided that I needed to research and learn more about this. And the Bardo Thodol has really added to what I learned in that first class.
what do you think of the notion? I mean, when Thomas and I were talking, and the idea comes up that, you know, this is a fairy tale. What do you think about that? Because well, I'll just leave it there. What do you think about that?
I myself can't call it a fairy tale. I think that those answers are within me. And if I ask myself, what does that mean to me? It's not so much a fairy tale, but it's a concept of a creative side. I think more creative side inside of me that I can look at and say, oh, this is another part of me. And all of this is within me. And if I need to find answers, I go within inside of me. I think in the old days, I used to go out there and ask the universe this or that, give me a response, give me something. But now I go inside of me to find those answers, and they come. They do come.
Very good. Thank you. John, how about you? Would you like to make some comments?
I like I'm not what I've been led to believe is that and it seems to make sense that people in different religions go to different places. So I'm not sure whether universally everybody would have this experience. Mostly I think it would be Buddhist experience.
Do you think that beings may go to the same places, but they have different ways in which of expressing those places?
Yeah, I'm sure that's yeah. I mean,
In other
that's
words,
true about everything. So certainly, yes.
right. So it's just a matter of our conceptualizations and our conventions of our cultures that devises the story.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Gary, would you like to add something?
Well, I know that I'm trying to think of the right way to say this because I have traveled through other religions. But to me, in Buddhism, although there's certainly a type of structure to it, the litany of the religions that I've had experience with and practiced to me was a way of stepping through a process to get you to a spiritual destination. In Buddhism, and forgive me if I'm not saying this very well, in Buddhism, everything is within you. I know that in religions they say that the prayer is within you, but the prayers are often written down. You can pray your own prayer. But in Buddhism, in meditation and releasing thought from your process and moving towards emptiness and quietness and clarity is very, very different than established centuries-long liturgy. that I've found in other religions. Now, I don't mean to demean them by saying that, but to me, there was always something missing. And I'm not far enough along in Buddhism to say that that I believe that spiritually I've discovered the Rosetta Stone in Buddhism, but I think that it is in it, I have found something that I haven't found elsewhere. It's not that not that there wasn't some value and some spiritual growth in other journeys, but there was always something missing. And it's because part of it is because our lives are like that. Buddhism does not, to me, embrace the steps towards success that the rest of our lives embrace, including our religious practices of various sorts. There is almost like a list of things that you do, and you do them repeatedly. And if you're doing good, you do them on a regular basis, once a week and once a day. But in Buddhism, to me, the journey towards mindfulness is a journey towards something that you're not doing once a day or 3 times a day or once a week. It's something that you're really living quietly in your mind and not saying. It's always there with you. It is always there with you. And I am so far from that, but I see it. I see the horizon, I think, but I'm not there. I'm probably not making a lot of sense, but there's something very different about it. You know, there's a lot of writing that you can read, but the core of it is not in a list of accomplishments. It's not in a checklist. It's in a type of quietude and serenity. And letting the chaos that surrounds us all, we're not indifferent to it, but it doesn't change what our essence is. And a lot of the chaos that surrounds us all affects us generally, affects most people generally, and they react to it. Buddhism teaches you not to react to it, to be that person. Probably didn't make much sense, but that's.
Oh, it's very good. So how do you think that the Bardo Thodol, what function did the Bardo Thodol play in what you've been talking about the past couple of minutes?
Well, the Bardo Thodol to me is something that's become more of a mystery the more I've listened to it, because, going into the path into whatever the next life is, or whatever your next state of existence is something I haven't fully grasped yet. I don't think that I'm at a state of understanding. I am reading things and hearing things about what you will see as you journey in between worlds. And the Bardo Thodol says sometimes if you see this, either don't go towards this, but go towards that. Don't react in this way, but react in that way. And depending on how you react will depend on how you will have a determining factor on how you will be reborn. And I found that confusing because I haven't been involved in it enough, and I haven't been able to think it through properly. So I have a lot of work to do in the Bardo Thodol. Well, and everything else as well, but the Bardo Thodol teaches me that we have a lot to understand, and as we continue our journey into eternity, and what forms that journey will take, and what we will be as we participate in that journey forever and ever.
Do you think that the imagery of the Bardo Thodol, you know, all the pictures and so on like that, and the names of the respective deities, does that add to the confusion, do you think? Or do you see that maybe there is, that is the way in which we kind of organize things, see an organization? Or should we just skip all the visualization stuff and get right to, you know, the textual meanings of the symbology, or not the symbology, but the meaning of the symbology, and stay in it at that level, at the how would you say, maybe the liturgy of that?
No, I don't think we should skip that stuff. I just think that it's a matter of accepting that it takes, it's a continuous journey, not only through this life, but into eternity, to understand what that means. There are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. It's just that I, in my human life, have been used to processes where you figure out things on some sort of understandable rate of schedule. Problem, variables, possibilities, solutions. But the Bardo Thodol and Buddhism in general doesn't work that way. You know, the life that I've lived, has been that kind of a life. I don't think I'm that different from a lot of people, but in particularly in my career, in my life, that is the way it is. You know, you get to the point you can see the end of the path and the life that I've lived. In Buddhism, and in the Bardo Thodol, which is of course Buddhism, I can't see the end of the path. We have a word for it, enlightenment, but you can't reach any conclusion by saying that's the end of the path, because it's much more complicated and it's infinite.
Okay, thank you. Let me move on. Let me ask Curtis. I think Gary just raised a good point, and you know, being able to see the light at the end of the path. I think that one of the things that the Bardo is trying to convey to us is that we are the light, and that we are the ones who are creating the fabrications that block that light, the concepts that block that light. So what do you think about that, Curtis?
I don't think I've wrestled with it as much as I've accepted it. You know, having read other religions and being familiar with the tension between deities and, you know, an absolute of some sort that's not pictured whatsoever. It's it doesn't bother me. The paradox doesn't bother me of deities and their existence or non-existence. You know, Carl Jung looked at the Bardo Thodol and he saw a rich psychological tableau of the human psyche. And it's got to work on that level too. No, that's just my thoughts. I'm not sure if I responded to what you asked, Lance.
No, that's fine. Did you have any other thoughts that you were wanted to make a comment about?
Well, I posted an article by Stephen Batchelor I ran across some time back. And he was the one that created the translation of the Way of the Bodhisattva that we used with Kempo. And he was a Tibetan Buddhist. And at some point, he just couldn't square the deities with the non-dualism. And he became an agnostic Buddhist, I think is the way he calls it, or maybe an atheistic Buddhist, very much more Theravadan. And, you know, so many of these deities were carried over from Hinduism. It's, you know, to me, Hinduism and Buddhism are on a continuum. I don't see them as separate.
Well, what about the traditional Bun tradition in Tibet?
What about it?
Many of the deities come from the Bun tradition.
I'm not sure which ones. A lot of them look fairly Hindu to me. Which ones are you thinking about?
Well, I can't say them off the top of my head, but I've got several books, you know, illustrated books that make the point, you know, that there wasn't quite the illustrative images in India, but there was a great tradition in Tibet. So a lot of that, you know, filtered down from Tibet back into India. There was still some that was in India. I mean, they had statues and they had great buildings and so on. But like the Tanka artwork and so on like that, a lot of that imagery came from the indigenous Bun tradition.
The part that's really rattles my curiosity, to combine two terms, rattling and curiosity, are the all the skulls, all the really blood-drenched symbology, symbols. You know, I just wonder how much of it carried over from the Bun, and before that, very primitive culture where, you know, there's a lot of violence. So anyway, that's it's very interesting.
Okay, thank you. I think that brings up a good point. Did somebody just put their hand up, want to say something? I thought I saw something. Okay, Jane.
I haven't looked at any of this as a fairy tale. I looked at it as truly a blueprint of how we should live and a process of dying. And as we were going through it, all the symbolism was very confusing. The pictures, and I was so intrigued with them as an artist and looking at all the details and why they were created the way they were, and as an artistic viewpoint. But when I looked at, as you explained, the symbolism and the true meaning of this, I realized there's a lot more than that the deities and all the artwork were just reminders of this way that we should be living, that we need to take in from and go from our heart and bring all this loving kindness into the world and live our life as truthfully to ourselves and show it out to everybody else as we can. And in taking this class, that's what it's reminded me to do, that I need to think, not think, but have it come from my heart, which is the truer place of showing compassion and love to other people. And in doing so, I find that people respond to you differently and treat you with a lot more compassion and loving kindness than they would if you hadn't. That that feeling comes forward and encompasses other things, and people respond to it. And this book, this practice that we've been just going through, that's what has done to me. It's just been a blueprint. It opened me up to a way to live. And I'm not even thinking about it. I'm trying to make it part of me and come from me. And I love that it's done that. I think all the opportunities throughout the Bardo Thodol about redeeming yourself. I thought that was, I would smile and laugh that with every opportunity, there was always another opportunity to move forward and redeem yourself, to move forward with loving kindness and compassion. And even at the very end, when we were talking about the rebirth, there still were opportunities for redemption. And so that's how I looked at it. That's not as a fairy tale. It was a blueprint. To me, it's a wonderful blueprint of how I want to live my life and hopefully move on into the next existence the way it's been laid out here. Not with meeting wrathful deities and all the imagery, but just moving forth with, as I said, with this loving kindness, coming from, not emanating from my brain, just emanating from my heart, from within.
Very good. I want to 2 points. Could you see that the Tibetan Buddhism, the way that we're learning it and so on, is like another language?
I don't have that much of a background in Tibetan Buddhism, but I think from what I've learned, I feel it. So I don't have the knowledge, but I feel it. So I don't know how to answer that as another language. Mm-hmm. It's just something I feel within.
All right, that's good. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is to remember that we are the deities. So if it's not confronting or not being confronted by a wrathful deity or a peaceful deity, it's that wrathful deity, that fierce deity is rising up out of us, or that the peaceful deity is rising up out of us when the situation calls for that, because of their activities and the way that they're operating to be able to overcome whatever is external that's coming into us, that we need to be able to pacify, that we need to be able to recognize as being the same. It's just the other side of the hand, because we do have this dualistic nature. So we have to recognize the dualism in all of its forms and not be a slave to it.
Yeah, that's true. There's always the dark side to things, and the way you put it, it's the dark side, recognizing that part and coming to grips with it and moving beyond that.
Well, showing it love, showing it compassion, seeing the wisdom that is there, and not just for our benefit, but for the benefit of others. That really is what I think is what keeps it pure. can we do it for others? Can it be done for others? And if we're holding on to it, does that right away corrupt it? You know, it's not something that can be held on to. It's something that it just permeates us. You know, it's all pervading.
Yeah, that's true. Because if you can let it go and not keep it within, then how you're interacting with yourself and with somebody else makes a very big difference. Because your interaction is a lot different. So yeah, it's the symbolism of what this is all creating, and I think that's the part that I would like to, just because I was so intrigued with all the symbolism, to look at in more detail and just see what it was that was presented here, and look at and study the pictures. And I was intrigued with all the symbolism of the paternalistic pictures of women being consorts rather than the way women are treated now. So there's just a lot of different things in the way things were presented, but it's all symbolic. And so that's something I want to look at. But it was a beautiful blueprint, and I loved the way you presented it to us, Lance. You made it very understandable, and I look forward to learning more about how we can incorporate this practice for ourselves.
Thank you. Tom, how about you? Louisa, let me interrupt Tom a second. Louisa, you had to put your hand up. Did you want to comment?
Yes. Curtis had a good point in the symbolic showing of skulls and bloody stuff and all that. And yeah, I looked at that and I thought, is that something I want to learn? I mean, I was questioning that too, but you kept telling us that it's all symbolic and so forth. And though I started thinking about, okay, those can be like a shadow inside of ourselves that we need to be aware of. Do we have that going on inside of us? And if we do, look at it and recognize it and work on letting that go so you don't become a symbolic thing like that. Look for the light, but recognize and look at those shadows to make sure that you're not harboring any of these shadows within you. And so when you kept saying this is symbolic, it shook me up and saying, yeah, Lance is saying this is symbolic. So at first when I saw these skulls and bloody stuff and all that, I looked at that and I thought, oh, I don't know that I have that, but you just don't know, and you need to look at that. And for me, it opened up that to notice if there was anything like that within me. And if there was, then I needed to recognize that and look at it and deal with it and do something so I wouldn't live in that symbolic, those symbols or shadows within me.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah. And that's kind of what I think I meant when I said, to look at this like a language, a different language. We see these things and they might appear to be abhorrent to us, but at the same time, they're showing us great love and compassion and confidence and so on like that in the face of great adversity. And so it's, so yeah, I think it's like getting to know a new language full of images and full of words, different words and so on like that. So very good. Thank you. So Tom, can you comment on something?
Oh, wow. You guys really have opened up my eyes to a lot of things. I mean, incredibly. I mean, the knowledge I have of Buddhism, I can literally fill a thimble. It's not much at all, but it was wonderful listening to all of you. It was eye-opening, you know. The little teachings that I have, but when I listen to Shantideva's teachings of the way of the Bodhisattva, I think in one of the chapters, one of the schools is asked, why do we prostrate? Why do we make offerings? Why do we make confessions? Beseech, pray, request, and dedicate? Because we're not enlightened yet. We're on that path, but we're not there yet. And that really rang really loud with me. Yes, I may get glimpses, small, tiny little glimpses, but really I'm, you know, on that path with all you Buddhas. And, you know, one day maybe I will realize my true nature. That's why I still prostrate, make offerings, do confessions, request, and beseeching, and praying. In the Bardo Thodol, the 100 deities in there, I think are the 100 different emotions that I have within myself. They can come out at any time. And by learning and studying and practicing and contemplating and meditating, it helps me control all those. And, you know, listening to everyone here, you know, you're all teachers. You're all Buddhas, like Lance said. You're all enlightened ones. You know, there's so much to be learned from all of you. Thank you, really.
Thank you. All right, so let's go back where we started. Jerry, what have you been thinking about while you've been listening to the discussions here?
Okay, what I've been thinking about is, so as we do self-inspection and try to make changes during our living, and we use prayer, we use meditation, I believe that allows us to influence other beings by giving our heart to and our joy out to others, and they receive it, and they so in a sense we are kind of, I use the word messaging the universe, other human beings on the planet, to allow for change to come to others. That's what I see about when I say, you know, prayer allows us to receive from others information. It doesn't have to be Buddhas or you know, beings on the other side. It could be messaging from animals, from trees, from the planet, from the universe. So I don't know, how do you feel about what I say?
I think it's great. I think that's right on. I think that's, you know, it sounds like the essence of what our spirituality is seeing the interconnectedness, you know, of all things. So yeah, I think that's great.
So what we need is everybody to do the same thing on the planet. And then we'll be able to make big changes in our climate and about wars and more peace and prosperity. So hopefully we can do it within our next thousand lifetimes.
I think that, maybe one of the things, in this particular period of time that we have right now, there's such division, and, there needs to be, defining what morality is and what love is, maybe even compassion, but, what all these things that I think, I took for granted that everybody knew, at least in the world that I live in here in the USA and so on. But it seems like now it's all got to be redefined in some way because everybody's defining it their own way. It's gotten bizarre.
It's true.
Thomas, I wanted to come to you next. What have you been thinking about while you've been listening?
My understanding of your, first, I'd like to separate your presentation from the content. So, yes, I think that you've done an excellent job of presenting the material over a period of weeks that were months, and I appreciate that all the way along. So I acknowledge that. In terms of the Bardo Thodol itself, as I understood it from your commentary, if we had not been successful up to the point of death, then at that moment, there arrived a time that if we had been diligent enough, lucky enough, that we could see the white light and go to the Western paradise right away. But if we didn't do that, then we had like 3 or 4 more opportunities to go there. And if we didn't, well, then we would just have to recycle through the whole process all over again. So it does not strike me as being an eternal process. The Kempos and Kenshins that I've listened to, they say you want to stop your cyclic existence. You want to get out of your cyclic existence. So there's no illusion there to the process being eternal. It's something that can be stopped and you can get out of. And so I'm believing that. And I'm not self-infatuated, but I believe that living a virtuous life, not a puritanical, holier than thou, just an everyday virtuous life is going to be good preparation for that moment at the point of death. And if I'm fortunate, I will see that white light and I will go to the Western paradise. So that's kind of my summary on it. As far as it being a fairy tale, the fairy tale is the rubric. It's the framework of all of the symbology that the texture that's put into the cloth that I guess it entices people or it attracts their attention. And maybe that's the whole purpose, is to get people's attention and, they can process it. So if that's its purpose, then that would be a good thing. In terms of the blood and things like that, Gyaltsen Rinpoche, who still is alive on the west coast of the United States, has made the remark more than once that the ancient Tibetan people were very ferocious and very warlike, and they were renowned in the plateau, the Tibetan plateau, as being formidable opponents. He did not want to go up against them. He said they even went into battle naked with knives and spears. So there is going to be mortality in encounters like that. So it's part of their tradition, is having all of that blood flowing at one time in their life. So that's a thought that arose. And then the terms of there being a darkness. Well, maybe there is a darkness out there, but it seems to me that having been raised in a Western, essentially Christian culture, that these ideas of lightness and darkness and good and bad and purity and evil, that's all part of the dichotomy. That's all part of the dualistic thought. That's the nirvana samsara conundrum. That's something that we want to not suppress or negate, but we want to wash away so that it doesn't exist anymore. So those are some thoughts. Are those all my thoughts? Well, those are the thoughts that come to mind right now.
Very good. Thank you very much. I want to go to Michael next, but I just want to respond to one thing that you said, and that is, the point of liberation, that to stop cyclic existence, that is another way of saying liberation. So I think, over and over again, we've talked about that at each stage is the possibility of liberation. So we talk about that, but if we're not able to liberate, then there is this, we return to the cyclic existence. So we're doing that and doing it with awareness of what it is that is causing that and what the result is and so on, ultimately brings us to the point, or can bring us to the point of that liberation. So I'd like to go to Michael.
So we've talked about our Buddha nature in terms of a jewel, and the jewel is there's lots of mention of jewel in Vajrayana teachings, and I think it's come to mean to me the idea of taking a force or an energy and recognizing or creating a fragmentation out of it. It's almost like a distribution. So if we were to run white light through the right prism, we would get all of those colors on the wall. And so the Bardo Thodol for me is sort of I think in terms of archetype, and Curtis was alluding to Jung, and that was his sort of world, was archetypes. And archetypes are the sorts of things that are in our deeper consciousness or our lower consciousness, or perhaps in our hearts, that recognize patterns that go perhaps beyond our beyond our birth, that might live in our DNA, or might just live in the world for us to discover. But I think that Bardo Thodol shows one great way to learn to dance with all of these facets, to dance with the deities that are there's just the little pieces of the Buddha nature broken up into their different sort of element colors and their different influences. It's a great way to look at humanity. A great way to look at our humanity is to sort of dissect the ways in which we walk with the world, and to honor the idea that we get to tweak all that. We get to dance with each little piece of ourselves and recognize all of those sort of separate energies and all the layers and all the interconnectedness. And dancing with the deities is it might be a good album cover, but I think it might be a good album, but it might be a good band name. But I think this is choreography. This is choreography for the soul. So it's full of archetype. It's fairy tale. It's narrative. It's storytelling with from the most basic of story arcs. But it's wonderful. It's very, very well written. It's inspired writing, and it's it feeds on our senses, human beings. We love the visual, we love the sensual. This is the story, and these are experiences that are described that appeal to all of our senses and really wake us up, wake up all of our senses at the same time as we try to get our fingers around it and try to imagine what's going on. And I think that's one of the purposes of the work. And I've really enjoyed this this exploration. Not my first, but probably not my last. I did finally break down and get the book, which is a little more than I thought it would be. But I think I'll try to make some time to read into it, and I love being able to practice with you all as well. It's been fun and consciousness raising.
Thank you. Louisa, I think might be next. You have some follow-up comments to make? No? Okay,
No, I was just raising my hand like that.
okay.
No.
No.
Thank you.
All right, John, how about you? Do you have any more thoughts that you'd like to share? Something while you were listening and thoughts that might have come into your mind?
I think it's a very serious thing that Padmasambhava wouldn't have written it like that if it weren't so not serious from the point of view of, you know, bad and depressing, but just has gravity, that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Curtis, I think you might be next.
No, I just enjoy the comments. Can't think of anything to add. I really think there's paradox. You know, if you try to reduce it to non-dualism, it's hard to feel devotion. You know, some dualism helps devotion a lot. You know, I don't think that there's I think it can be reduced to non-dualism, but the reality is, my reality is very, very wrapped up in I'm Curtis and you're Lance. And it's hard for me to feel non-dualistic about that. So I interact with you as a separate human being. And so it is with deity until, you know, the higher stages of consciousness. They're both true. I mean, you listen to Milarepa, and he's having these experiences that are both dual and non-dual at the same time. You know, he's interacting with spirits and other people like a human being, and yet there's a non-dualistic element that often comes in to his experience of those things. But there are many, many ways in which he experiences duality in his humanness.
That's a good observation. Thank you. Jane, did you have anything that you want to follow up with?
Only that I understood your question later on about, was this like a second language? And I understand what you meant with that. And I've just enjoyed listening to everybody's comments and Michael's comments about archetypes, because they're intrinsic part of our intrinsic nature of who we are. And Louise's comments about embracing the shadow side of us, which would be the symbolism of those wrathful deities. And the whole thing is just very intriguing.
Okay.
It's been a very interesting conversation. And the Bardo Thodol is, it's something that requires a lot more study. but it's, I'm so excited that we took part in this.
Say something.
Yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I want to leave you with a thought, and we don't have to answer it here, but I don't understand from the Buddhist point of view, what happens once you ascend? You go floating around out there? Are you going to be impacting the Earth and different planetoids or whatever it is? And then if that's the case, then you are sending information back into the planet to help people to understand. So it's not clear from what I've learned in this class what's out there once you what do you call the word, ascend.
Oh, become enlightened.
Well, not become enlightened, because you can become enlightened on the planet, and if you do, then you have the ability to ascend. And science says there's many levels of ascension, and many religions say that too. But what is there out there for us?
I think it's a really good question. I think it's not something that we can answer very quickly. I say you pointed that out when you first introduced the question. But if you can save that question, write it down, and let's look at that question repeatedly over the next few weeks as we get into this next part of the daily practice, and keep that in mind, because it is a fundamental, pertinent question. So, Gary, did you have anything that you wanted to follow up with? Okay. Tom, how about you?
No.
All right. Well, yeah, if you have ideas and thoughts, let's talk about them, in the future, I presume then everybody wants to continue on. Would you like to have a more in-depth analysis of the Buddha families and look at it as an organizational flow chart? Here's the father and the mother, and then here are the spiritual sons and daughters, and then here are the gatekeepers, and then here are the other deities, and so on like that. Would you like to look at it that way? Or the other choice is to look at it from just the point of view of peacefulness and of being prepared to be able to progress, being able to look at what the gates are, so the gatekeepers are just an imagery of what that is, so we can look at it from a artistic point of view, along with the symbology of it, or the meaning of the symbology, or we can just look at it as the raw textual meaning of it. So I think I got a sense that everybody enjoyed the imagery. So I kind of think going along with the iconography is a good idea.
Well, what I'd like to see us go forward for at least a couple of weeks and just lay out the schematic of what's in your mind as to a further presentation, and then backfill it with the details about the family members and stuff like that. Because to just lay that on us right at the beginning, I think that we can get lost in the imagery and lose sight of where we're going with this. So I'd like to get a little further down the road and then take a rest stop and go back and fill in as to how we got to that rest stop. That makes sense to you?
Not exactly. I think we need to talk about that. Louisa, did you have a comment about that? And Jane has a comment.
I liked your second option, but I also think that it would be very helpful on how this applies to us today in the world that we're living in. How and what do we need to learn about, I mean, everything is accelerating on this planet, on this universe. And there's so many challenges and so many things that stress us in life. And I would like to learn more about how Buddhism can help bring us to a place where, even though everything's mixed going around us so fast and technology is moving all the time and the world is accelerating the fastest pace that it ever has, how can we benefit from all this and learn about how we exist on this planet with everything just moving in terms of our Buddhist heart, our Buddha Cheetah?
Okay, thank you. Jane?
And my comment was, I think going into a little bit more depth in the symbolism of the imagery is an important way to learn about how to incorporate this into our lives and put it into a practical aspect, because as we see that symbolism by learning about all these different families and all the different aspects of them, then we can truly understand how we bring that in and understand that and put it out there to the world, and just see how it incorporates into our lives, because we've studied this from the ancient perspective, and I agree with Louisa. I'd like to learn more about how to incorporate it into my life now, but because this is so rich in the symbolism, we can't forget about that. And I think as we learn more about the symbolism, it will make better sense to all of us about how we utilize it in today's life.
Can I say something also?
Sure.
I'll make it short. It's interesting because I'm sitting here and saying, okay, I'm going to meditate on an issue. But I'd like to see examples of, say, you're angry, or you're sad, or you're miserable, or you're hurting, or so. I'd like to see examples of how we can meditate to make changes in ourselves. And so nothing was ever said about that. You know what I mean? Just meditate on it and make it go away. How do you do that?
Well, that's stages of the meditation. And I think you raise good points. I think there's a couple of things here that I would say about this is, number one, I have very limited ability to be able to teach these things.
Yeah.
I'm not ordained, and my education is limited. I've been fortunate to have some experience with this and so on. And that's what I've been trying to inspire people to have their own experiences with, more than anything else. It was not to share mine, other than to maybe, create some kind of a little bit of an inspiration that an ordinary guy like me can have some experience with this. And it's a commitment to do it. It's making time to do it and so on. And then it brings me to the next point is, right now we're looking at a very narrow part of things that has a very broad base to it, but there's lots of other books. There's lots of other teachers, who are more qualified to talk about some of these things. So, one of the analogies that I use in Buddhism 101 is, for us in the West, learning about Buddhism is like being handed a 2,000-piece jigsaw puzzle without a picture to have to put together. And so that's what we try to do in Western Buddhism, and our teachers are coming from Tibet, and they have a culture in the way that they teach and so on. And we have a culture in a way that we've been taught and what we teach. And the two sometimes clash with each other. They don't come together. They've only been here for 60 years. And really, or I should say, they've been out of Tibet for 60 years, but they've only been here for about 40 years. not since 1980 that most of these Rinpoches have come to the West. So it's a very narrow time frame that we're talking about here. So there's a lot to be improved in generations to come about how these things come together. But we have a unique job here to be able to use our energy to be able to remember that and to bring that and to make it possible for those who follow us, that it's not lost in our generation. And that's, to me, a concern. What do our children know? What do our grandchildren know about this? Are they even interested in spirituality and so on? So my point is, have we read other books? Have we taken other teachings by other teachers and so on, and start putting that into the kettle of experience? And out of that, you begin to get, more and more of contact, more and more spirituality about it, and not just hearing it from one person's point of view or two persons' point of view or just one book's point of view, but seeing it in different ways. So I invite you to use Google for any of your questions. Google has gotten so good. It's our go-to thing for very mundane things, but it's also very good for spirituality. Ricky Leaks has gotten very good, or not Ricky Leaks, but whatever it's called. And but there's many things, and somebody brought up the thing about the Lotsawa house and so on. There's many great things that are written on our website, Drikung Dharma Surya. There are many, many, many great commentaries that are written on there. And I can point you in many different directions, to hear teachings of different teachers and giving commentaries about the topics that we do talk about. So I invite you for that. For me, I think I need the structure of staying with, right now, the Bardo Thodol and letting Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava speak and using his guide through this, and to see this through the end. And what we can, fold into that is really dependent upon your questions and your input, your comments, to help, guide the discussion along and so on. But I think that we use this text as what we've been doing, but maybe open it up to more discussion. If you all have nothing better to do on Friday nights, this to me is the best thing I can think of to do. So we can continue this as long as you want. And so we can make it very dynamic by talking about things that we might have read or questions we have, and opening it up. But I can't put myself into a position of being a definitive answer for everything.
Lance, I think it's been a nice balance, and it's ebbed and flowed in different directions between reading it as practice and studying it. And now that we've been able to go through the whole thing, with your elucidation on things, I think to be able to read it some more without having to study it, since we've done it, will be very useful, to help us get some of the rhythms you can't when we have to, have some study built into it. So I'm looking forward to that.
All right, good. Well, this next section really encapsulates in 30 or 40 pages, what the whole Bardo Thodol is. So it's much more to the point. It's simpler, but it should evoke, the thoughts that might have come to our minds while we were hearing the long part. And also it gives us a reason to go back into those sections and say, well, what's the detail about that? Let me find out some more, or go to the book and look at the book. And if you remember at the very, very, very beginning, Debbie made an Excel spreadsheet that beats the page numbers of the Bardo Thodol against the Gourmet Dorje book. So if you're looking at page 132 in the Bardo Thodol text here, you can look at that Excel spreadsheet that she made and say, okay, you can read about that on page 269 or whatever in the text. So that should give more cause for research. So that we try to make it real easy for everybody.
Lance,
I don't think
I'm a little confused. I thought we were talking about reading through the Pesha as practice. Are you talking about doing more study?
I'm talking about on page 17 of the Pesha text.
Okay.
Starts the natural liberation of habitual tendencies, the main practice. So this is like the daily practice that we can engage in for us in the Bardo of living now.
So we're going to, in the future, for some weeks, we're going to be using the Peshas and reading through it as practice, not so much as study, but as practice.
Well, yeah, but explaining what the practice is. So going through it, and talking about it as necessary.
But that'll be different because we've already done it. So we'll be doing it a little bit. We'll be mostly reading through it.
Well, tune in. I think you'll find it useful.
I'm just curious what we're going to be doing compared to what we've done.
We're looking at a little bit more of a concise, simplified daily practice to be able to put this into a context and perspective that is not quite as grand as the whole Bardo Thodol itself. Okay. So, like I said, trusting the deities, trusting these great masters is part of the process, because we may not understand it the first time through, or even the second or third time, but usually we find out, oh, that's what they meant. Now,
am I correct? I know we read through the whole Bardo Thodol.
we didn't read this. We didn't read this.
Oh, okay. I thought we'd done the whole thing.
We did, but we left this. I reminded you many, many times that we didn't do the main practice on page 17. That starts on page 17. So if you look at your table of contents, it goes from page 17 and to page 67. So it's 50 pages.
Okay.
All right. And in the meantime, and along with that, we can talk more about the Buddha. So I hope that there's, penetrating questions. All right. So thank you all very much. I hope I haven't been rude in any way or said the wrong thing. I didn't mean to, but just trying to keep the wheels on the track.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much, Lance, for what you've taught us, and we'll continue on.
Well,
Thank you
very
so much.
Good. Thank you. I look forward to the next coming weeks and months. So,
Thank you, Lance.
thank you all. We need to do our dedication, so please bear with me for just a minute, and we can do that. And whatever wisdom and merit that we have gained, we now dedicate for the benefit of other beings. So this here, I need to get rid of this, move this. And I had my microphone on the floor. I must have sounded like I was in a well or something like that. I discovered that my microphone was on the floor.
You sounded normal, Lance.
Well,
I
it's a
mean,
good
really,
microphone.
It must be another microphone that's picking you up, because you haven't sounded different at all.
Oh, really? Okay, well, it's a good microphone. All right, here we are. This is the brief prayer to be reborn in the blissful pure land of Dewa Chen, the pure land of Buddha Amitabha, otherwise known as Sukhavati. So we recite this. E Maho. In the center is the marvelous Buddha Amitabha of boundless light. On the right side is Avalokiteshvara, the Lord of great compassion. On the left is Vajrapani, the Lord of powerful means. All are surrounded by limitless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is the blissful pure land of Dewachen. When I and all beings pass from samsara, may we be born in Dewachen without taking samsaric rebirth. May I have the blessing of meeting Amitabha face to face. By the power and blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, may I attain this aspiration without hindrance. Teata pensa driwa avo bodhanaya soha. Translated means, this is it. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 5 Buddha families who have destroyed defilement lead to equipoise. Soha, may it be so. Teata pensadriva avo bodhanaya soha. So it is the Buddhas, it is the Sambhogagaya Buddhas, these meditational Buddhas that lead us to equipoise. The teachers are just pointing you in that direction. But by recognizing those 5 Buddha families within yourself is the solution to the problem. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. By this virtue, may I achieve all knowingness by defeating all enemies' confusion. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara, the ocean of suffering. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all merit for all sentient beings. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Shri. So tonight it's late. So in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, Om, Ah, Hum, Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very, very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Right. See you next week. Thank you.